Recently, I've started having some conversations with schools who are passionate about Chinese language education, but want to modernize it and transform it in a way that's suitable for the new generation. And I've put together this material. It's a little bit dense and in some cases academic, but I figured you guys might be interested in this as well. So I recorded a session for you guys. The first topic we're going to cover is what's unique about Chinese that's different from English and most other languages out there. Why is it so uniquely difficult? It's important to acknowledge this because it implies a different way of learning the language and teaching the language. Second one is the learning triad. This came out of the Hong Kong University Department of Linguistics. It's the recognition that there are three pieces. There is the shape of the word, the visual form, the sound, and then the meaning. And then at what age we make each connection is critical. Third piece is the reading flywheel. For those of us who don't live in immersive Chinese environments and don't want to be beating our kids over the heads every day with a lot of pressure to complete worksheets, etc., this is one of our key tactics to get them to be interested in reading, love reading, and as they enter that flywheel, the more they read, the more vocab they learn, and the more vocab they learn, the more interesting books they're able to read, and then that just spins up into a snowball, growing snowball by itself. And finally, what's the roadmap for getting there, and what are key learning windows of opportunity that we should not miss if we have the chance to do so. So let's go. Firstly, what is different about Chinese? This is a little bit technical, and I'm also not a linguistics expert, but this is the research that I've come across. There's a difference between phonographic languages and logographic languages. Most of the languages out there, English, French, Italian, they're phonographic languages. And in terms of the academic classification of languages, there tends to be two core branches. There's alphabetic, in other words, phonetic, and English falls into here. But Chinese is at a very, very different branch of the tree called logographic. And even amongst CJK languages, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, Chinese is the most logographic of the three. Japanese and Korean have some hybrid of the different systems. And what exactly do we mean by logographic? And there are lots of technical definitions, but here's a simple one. A unit of writing that contains no visual clue to its pronunciation. And here, this is from the Department of Washington by a Chinese linguistics expert. And he was trying to plot the different languages across these dimensions to try and quantify the transparency of writing systems. And I guess with transparency, we would link that with how difficult it is to learn. And you can see Chinese and the kanji part of Japanese is way off on its a separate end of the spectrum. And so there's a recognition, and I'm sure you guys already all know this, it's difficult. And finally, this is from another paper, which plots different languages along the spectrum of phonographic to logographic, and there is no language that's purely one or the other, but Chinese is at the furthest end of the spectrum towards logographic. So moving on to the triad of Chinese learning. It's quite interesting because in the Maui Stars app, we do have a writing component, and a lot of people have asked us, do the kids really need to be learning writing these days with speech to text and artificial intelligence? Do they need to know how to write? And my core point is, with the game and Maui Stars, the writing game, it's insufficient for you to use that to learn how to write. But doing that game helps you to read. And this is the supporting research. This paper came out of the Department of Linguistics from the University of Hong Kong. It says reading depends on writing in Chinese. How counterintuitive. This is an extract of the abstract. And what it says is that over the past 4 decades, there's been a huge amount of research and studies of alphabetical Western languages that proves the strong association between the child's listening skills and their ability to read. And yes, that makes complete sense, but much of this research does not explicitly take the uniqueness of Chinese into consideration, which is the fact that it also has you also need to memorize the shape of the characters. And so here, because logographic characters in Chinese are based on meaning rather than phonology, here we show that the ability to read Chinese is strongly related to a child's reading skills, and that the relationship between phonological awareness and Chinese reading is much weaker than that of the reports regarding alphabetic languages. And here it kind of talks about how the establishment of motor programs that lead to the formation of long-term motor memories of Chinese characters. You're talking about how the cognitive processes relating to the acquisition of Chinese knowledge is actually significantly different from alphabetic languages. And this is the triad that I talked about. So there's the meaning system, there's the visual form of the word, and then there's the sound. And only when you make these 3 connections for an increasing number of characters do you really start to master the language. So now let's talk about why this is relevant in our learning objective, which is the reading flywheel. This has no research literature supporting it, but I know it's a lot of parents' thesis for how they can help their kids learn Chinese in a less painful way than cramming. So here's the cycle, very simple. So there's a kid in the middle. If only we can get them to love reading Chinese books, they will acquire new vocabulary by themselves, and then that will make it even easier for them to read more books, and they're able to read even more interesting books, and they will go around in a cycle with an snowballing into increasing Chinese literacy. And augmenting this is the concept of social interaction, right? If they can be part of a cohort of kids who are all really interested in the same reading book series or topics, that can drive further momentum and pour more fuel into this cycle. So this is all great, but there is a problem or a challenge. And this is conceptual, but think about this axis as being increasing literacy. So the more vocab and more words you know, then you go up the literacy curve. This is how interesting the materials are that you're able to read. And for the sake of argument, let's say English is roughly linear. So the more words you know, the more interesting things are. And so as long as you go along this with age, then what you're able to read is also grows with your intellectual capability. But Chinese is an S curve. It is not linear. What is an S curve? It means that until you reach this minimum level of literacy, and we can argue, is it 500 characters? Is it 1,000 characters? There is a minimum threshold that you need to reach to actually start to read interesting things. And of course, when you're really young, when you're 3 or 4, your parents or your teachers are reading the material to you, so you don't experience the gap so much. But when you get to 7, 8, 9, if your literacy level is still here, what you're able to read is this. but your intellectual level is here. So there's a increasing, growing gap between what's going to capture your interest and your capability. And the more we let this gap grow, the harder it is to get into that cycle. And so, as a parent, I have set my core learning objective to attain this, such that my child can get into that virtuous cycle of reading. And so, how do we get there? Here's a roadmap. If I just simplify that triad from the Hong Kong University, you've got the visual form. So for example, how, this is the shape of the word. You've got the meaning and sample usage. So how means good, 真好, 好像, 你好吗, all has slightly different meanings depending on what characters you bundle it with. And then there's the sound or the phonetic aspect, how. And when they're very young, like before they're really able to start reading, you double down on linkage A, connecting the sound with the meaning, sound with the meaning. And you can do this by, if your family has the resources, by speaking to them, speaking to each other in that language, or reading out loud to them. And if you're not able to do it, that's okay. There's plenty of media that can give them that exposure. You can choose Chinese shows on Netflix. You can play them audio books. There's tons of great YouTube material out there. And if you have the ability to do so in your travels, go and visit Chinese speaking places. That will all help to create that richness that will bond sounds with meaning. And then, of course, you can continue this forever, really. But the argument is like between ages 0 and 4, you really want to be doubling down on that part, because that will make things a lot easier. And then when you get to ages 4 to 7, where it becomes developmentally appropriate to start introducing these characters, what you want to do is to start building linkage B. So the visual form connect with the meaning, visual form connect with the sound. And so you're plugging into this connection to form the triangle. And during this time, you want to be forming these triangles for like hundreds of words. And once you've gotten that foundation, then you've like hit the key milestone to enter the reading flywheel. And I'm making this sort of like binary, like you must hit X characters. Clearly it's there is a spectrum, right? It's like it's a process. It's not like binary, but just trying to make it simple to understand. If you're able to achieve this, then you can enter the reading flywheel, and then they'll just learn by themselves. So that's the grand theory here. And the Mommy Stars app, it's really a personal passion project, and it doesn't solve this whole thing. It's one of the tools that you can use as you're in this intermediate stage to help get to this milestone. And failure modes, this is also where a lot of people fall down, because it's really difficult and requires a lot of commitment. So hopefully with the tools that we've built, we've just made that a little bit easier, if not taken the challenge away. So I hope you find that helpful.